Welcome to Carter's Retro Reviews. Today we're going to be reviewing Bubble Symphony for the Sega Saturn. I was just thinking about it before. Bubble Symphony sounds more like the description you'd give for me farting in the bath. Except instead of beautiful colours and magical sounds, it's really just putrid smells and disappointment. I only just came up with this when I pressed the record button. I had nothing to say before that. So this is still amusing to me. Alright, without further ado, here is the review for a Bubble Symphony. I have two distinct feelings on the sequel to Bubble Bobble, known as Bubble Symphony. On one hand, it plays more or less the same as the original, so it feels somewhat lazy. It has some obvious improvements, but on the other hand, what else can you do with Bubble Bobble? The original is a classic, and if you just do more of the same with minor changes, would it still be considered a classic also? Or has it worn out its welcome? To begin with, while I didn't know that Bubble Bobble had a sequel, it's not surprising that it does. The game was released in the arcade in 1994 before a Sega Saturn port in 1997. The original was so popular that it ended up on everything. Even on the Sega Saturn, it was packaged up with Rainbow Island. I've already reviewed that package and the link for that review is in the description, so it shouldn't be a surprise that I also love the sequel, which really feels like more of the same. To be fair, they could have released a whole lot more sequels, which were also minor tweaks, and I probably would have enjoyed most, if not all of them equally. So indulge me for the next minute or two while I give a brief rundown. I know it sounds a bit lazy, but I'll be making comparisons to the original so that people have a frame of reference. It's really hard to talk about the presentation and the atmosphere of the game without talking about the graphics and sound, so there will be a slight overlap in discussion because the presentation between this and the original is immediate and obvious. I want to talk about the backgrounds and improved sprites because my original thoughts were how minimal the improvements were, but after further deliberation the changes are pretty radical in the Bubble Bobble canon. The inclusion of backgrounds between the original and this does make the presentation feel different and fresh, as well as improvements in sprites really adds to it. The reason I was so dismissive of the presentation originally, apart from the fact that my memory of the original game differed from reality, was that it stuck to the box format of the original. And while I think it's important to the series, it's also something that they could probably try and do something with down the line. But for now, it's perfect. If perfection is what you achieve the first time, then why change? It really taps into the nostalgia and brings it more up to date. Graphics of this port are spot on. The backgrounds are a massive upgrade in quality from the non-existent backgrounds of the original. In fact, it's the first thing I literally noticed and is one of the standout features between this and the original. I must make special mention that some of the backgrounds really do look very nice. It looks great, the colour palette is absolutely amazing, smooth frame rate, no bleeding, no glitching, just perfect from start to finish. I realise that the original was done by Probe and this was done by Ving, but the quality of both ports has been replicated. Even my initial impressions of the soundtrack felt like it was only small changes since the first game, because they were either mostly or all of the same songs as the original. But they've all been greatly improved upon, giving the music a much fuller sound which results in giving a better feel. It still has that Disney whimsical feeling to it, which only really adds to the game. The only way that they could somehow make this better is if they patch in some Russian ska. On its own, the game handles and plays well. The fundamentals of shooting bubbles out of your mouth and destroying the bubbles is still here, as well as different types of bubble like lightning bubbles and rainbow bubbles. The concept is simple but so effective, and this sort of gameplay is what I really like a lot. There's no major difference in gameplay and mechanics, but there are quite a few minor changes. A boss is now encountered every 5 to 10 levels, allowing you to choose different levels once the boss has been beaten. You also have 2 new characters to choose from, and each character has their own abilities. Also, you can now charge your attack. Hold down the bubble button and depending on your character will depend upon what formation multiple bubbles come out. As well as players need to collect certain square cards with music notes inside in order to get the 4 keys that lead to the final world or face an early false ending. This game also includes the enemies of the original as well as some new ones as well. There's a whole bunch of levels and a 2-player with 4 characters to choose from. You could effectively beat this game in under an hour and a half if you're good at it, but I think that can be said about a lot of games on this console. The challenge is to get that good. Would I recommend this game? Of course. The arcade version of this game is very enjoyable and the port is damn near perfect. If you're trying to find another really solid game for the Sega Saturn, it would be a complete disservice to your collection not to have it.